I've managed to build a multi-million dollar property portfolio in just a few short years, and I want to inspire and motivate other Australians that if I can do it, so can you. The Tailored Property Wealth podcast has been created to help educate, mentor, coach, and support you through everything relating to property investing to make sure you go out there and make a much better educated decision when investing in property. Please like, share, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might see value in it. Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Tailored Property Wealth podcast. My name is Casey Taylor. I am the Managing Director of Tailored Property Wealth, and I'm starting this podcast to really be able to help investors go out there and invest with more confidence and make more educated decisions when they are purchasing. In this episode today, I'm going to be going through, some of the episodes that we got coming up, as well as talking about a little bit of my background, my career, and my property portfolio to date. My property portfolio currently consists of 7 properties and a granny flat. Around $4.8 million is the value of the portfolio at the moment, and currently the net worth is around 1.7 mil. I'll also go through what my plans are in the portfolio in kind of the short term as well. So I guess just touching in a little bit in further depth on what this podcast is going to be all about. It's going to be making sure you can go out there, listen to these episodes, get a lot more educated. And if you're going out there and purchasing an investment property by yourself, you're just going to have more confidence. You're going to be able to mitigate your risk and lower your risk as well. Just so in 20 years' time, that property is going to perform really well for you, and it's going to be lower risk. And that's what we're here to do, right? Make those investments with low risk and create financial freedom so you can spend more time doing what you wish, right? Whether it's travel, going to the beach, spending time in nature, or if for you it is doing spending your money on material things, that's something as well, right? So cool. Let's get into it. So I just want to touch on some of the episodes coming up first, right? The second episode we've got coming up, and these are pre-recorded, I should say, as you're listening to them. They're already ready to go, and these episodes will come out consistently every single week. If not, we'll be doubling them up with 2 episodes. So we will be consistent. You'll see them come out the same time every single week, so you can prepare for it. If you want to listen to me babble on about some property stuff, you'll be able to listen to that and know when it's coming out. So episode 2, the 5 pillars to successful property investing. Episode 3, the 2 moving parts to property investing, which is finance and asset selection. How to mitigate your risk as a property investor, the A team of specialists you must surround yourself with, why invest in residential Australian real estate, the factors contributing to the property market performing right now. The list goes on. There's going to be lots and lots of episodes, lots of value that's going to be added, so you can go out there and make those property investing decisions more educated. All right. So a little bit about my background. Some listeners, they might kind of know my background. Some listeners might not. So I was born and bred in the country town of Tamworth, the country music capital of Australia. Yeehaw! I was there until I think I was about 25, made the move down to Newcastle in 2015. I was never a really good student, I'll be honest, in school. I was never naturally smart or academic. I was never naturally athletic either. So that's kind of instilled for me that I've had to work for things that I wanted, just consistently work hard. And I think that's probably one of the best things I can do is I can go out there and be consistent and work hard, and that's paid off with being able to take action in other areas. So putting that hard work into action, I guess. My first job was actually on a chicken farm picking up eggs. I lived out of town at the time in Tamworth. It was a pretty rough job, but it actually paid pretty well at the time. I was pretty quick at picking those eggs up, so it was good money for when I was 16. And then I actually got got a job in a Chinese restaurant as well. I was a little rice boy, could make a mean fried rice, and I was doing both of those jobs on the weekend, and that's where I really started to save money quite consistently. And then once I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I just got a job at McDonald's, and I started doing overnights there actually. No one wanted to do it. I wanted the hours, so I put my hand up for it. And because I got more hours, I was able to like just learn everything quite quickly and moved into the management side of things. And that's, I think, where it really instilled a couple of things that have stayed with me throughout my career. And number one is processes and procedures. They're super driven off checklists and just that process and procedure, whether you go to, I guess, a restaurant in Tamworth or Newcastle, wherever it is, those procedures are the same. And that's why it's consistent all the time. And the second one was customer service. I think customer service these days is going a little bit out of fashion. Um, and that's just something that I'm cognitive of and I notice when I go out there and I get served wherever it is. Customer service just isn't how it used to be. And that's something I'm really, really passionate about is providing that high level of customer service, but also getting the results for clients. Um, so yeah, that really instilled that in me, I think, at that point in time. Doing shift work as a manager as well, it just instills, I think, that work ethic, um, which has also helped just moving throughout my career. In 2012, I decided I was going to do my real estate course. I've been interested in property. I think I think what sparked it was when I was 11, we started to build a property in my family, and I remember sitting down and doing drawings of floor plans, and it kind of just sparked something, and I got really interested in property. And then ever since then, I was just interested, and I wanted to be a property investor. I knew that that's something I wanted to do. So I did this course 2012, finished that. My claim to fame was auctioneer of the day, which was something that scared the absolute shit out of me, to be honest. Um, Practicing that over the 6 weeks, it just made me learn a lot that if you just put your mind to something, you can put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and grow, learn, and be able to do something that you thought you probably couldn't have done. So it's just sometimes you just got to get out there and give things a crack, I think, and not be scared to fail. Failure is okay. Um, and it's really not failure if you learn from it and grow. Um, so, end of 2012, finishing the real estate course, I knew I wanted to move to Newcastle. So I made a decision not to get into real estate at that point in time. And that was just really, I didn't want to build up, I guess, a network locally only to move down and have to start that process again. So I made a decision to kind of pivot and get into something that complemented that industry, which was finance. Obviously different, but a lot of those skills can be transferable across. So I started off as a customer service officer in a branch. I was pretty much a bank teller, but it was an all rounder kind of role. And then I moved down to Newcastle and worked my way around finance down here, customer service roles again, um, sales roles, settlement roles, leadership roles, and then lending roles. So I was able to build up a lot of knowledge in that finance space. And I guess the settlement side of things and the lending side of things really helped me build on a lot of transferable skills across to what I do now in the buyer's agency space, as well as I was learning as much as I possibly could outside of working full time in the property investing side of things. I made a decision to actually do Uber Eats as a second income source. So it could be more flexible when I'd finish work. I could go out and do that, or I could do it on the weekends when I was free or whatever it was. And I pumped Uber Eats. But one of the most powerful things about that whole thing was I could listen to audiobooks and podcasts at that time to really build up my knowledge base. And I think it was one of the most powerful things that I did at that point in time because I was saving massive money to inject back into properties, but I was also building up that knowledge base, which I carry to this day. So I think that that was really, really powerful. Okay. So I guess that's just really a bit of my background. I went out into the buyer's agent space at the end of 2021 full time, took that plunge, and I've never really looked back. And actually love what I do now. Just being able to go out there and help Australians invest in property and make those more educated decisions. There's a lot of stigma out there that property investing doesn't work, or they hear from someone that has done it and they've made a mistake, and then it scares others off. But if you do it right and you do it well and you have that long-term mindset, property will serve you extremely well. It's not going to make you rich overnight. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're not going to buy a property and wake up tomorrow and be financially free or anything like that. It's a long game, and you have to be consistent. You have to have that mindset as well for a 15, 20-year period. And there's going to be negativity. There's going to be positivity in the marketplace, in mainstream media. Things are going to go wrong as well, right? We're dealing with tenants. We're dealing with properties. There's going to be maintenance. There's going to be issues with tenants, especially if you're holding for a 15-year period, right? So that's something that you have to understand, but don't let that be a reason for you to sell a property in the short term and say, oh, it's not working, the tenant's a pain in the ass, or whatever it is. We have measures in place to help mitigate that, but things still are going to go wrong. Okay, that's the reality of it. Alrighty, so let's get into the property portfolio. My portfolio, the purchases I've made, how they've performed, and what they kind of look like now. And I guess there's some lessons within that to learn throughout that process. So first purchase for myself, March 2020. If you remember at the time, March 2020 was the start of COVID. Everyone was freaking out. I remember right around this time, that's when the whole toilet paper scenario was going on. People were lining up outside Aldi, I remember, just to buy toilet paper. So lots of people telling me not to purchase at that time. I just didn't listen, focused on the long-term goal, which is building a property portfolio, and I made that purchase. Now, the first purchase I actually made through another buyer's agent, and that was because my role in lending at the time, I was very, very time poor. I had the knowledge base there, but just simply, I just didn't have the time to be able to put in the time and the effort to go out there and source that property. So I used a buyer's agent. This property actually wouldn't meet our due diligence process now, but it has still performed well. So I purchased this property with a 5% deposit and paid LMI. So I leveraged really high. With that comes higher interest rate, and you obviously pay your LMI, but it's served me very, very well. Purchased that property for $435,000. The yield at the time of the purchase was 5.02% as a gross yield, which was $420 a week in rent. Now, I've got a valuation completed this month. Value, $750,000. Yield now, 7.41% on that original purchase price, being $620 a week. I actually just completed a reno on this property. Very cosmetic reno, paint, a little bit of flooring, painted the kitchen as well, replaced the handles. Very, very simple stuff. However, it just gave it that little bit more modern feel and just freshen the property up. And I just have a mindset every kind of 5 years, that's something that I'll do inside my portfolio, because over time they're going to get a little bit tired. You got tenants in there, they're just not quite looking after it the way you probably would with your own home. That's the reality of it. So made a lot of capital growth in that property, and that rental yield over time increases. And that's something super important to remember that people, they get stuck with. At the time when you make a purchase, it might be costing you a little bit, and that's the environment we're in now. But over time, with rental income growth and then rates reduce, that cash flow is going to improve. Okay. So when I made that purchase at the time, it was actually positive cash flow because rates were so low back then. But now that's changed, right? But because that yield's increased, it does make it easier to hold that property. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tailored Property Wealth Podcast. I hope you're learning lots and getting lots of value out of this episode. If you want to discuss the opportunity of working with us here at Tailored Property Wealth, jump across to the website www.tailoredpropertywealth.com.au, complete the contact form, let us know that you're listening to the Tailored Property Wealth Podcast, and let's reach out, let's have a chat and see how we can help you execute on your property goals. All right, second purchase in the portfolio was July 2020. Again, time poor, so we used a BA for this one as well. This purchase was for $475,000. Yield at the time, 5.03%, so quite similar to the first property. $460 a week in terms of rent, and that property is now valued at $775,000. So good capital growth again. Yield now 6.78% with $620 a week. I think this one's due to increase a little bit later this year. But again, that rental yield on the original purchase price is increasing, making it easier to hold that property long term. Okay. This was still around COVID time, so there was a lot of people just got in before it kind of started to pick up and people realized that things were going to keep moving on. So that was a really good purchase, just because you weren't competing with as many people, so you could get some pretty strong deals at the time. That purchase was a 20% deposit, no LMI in that portfolio. So then we come to third purchase, which was May 2021. Now, with my first purchase, because I leveraged at that 5% deposit and paid LMI, I knew that for the second purchase, if I wanted to make that really quickly again, that I wouldn't be able to leverage the equity out of the first one, although it grew in value, because I'd have to pay more lenders' mortgage insurance, and a lot of lenders wouldn't look at that. So I worked my absolute butt off. That's when I was doing Uber Eats on top of a really full-on, full-time role. But what I was able to do, I purchased this one by myself because a little bit later on in that May, I dropped back. Things were easier and I purchased that property myself. I had more time. So purchase price $429. The gross yield at the time of purchase was 4.96%, which was $410 a week. There was tenants in place in that property, and that property just got valued this month, $650,000. Now, the rent on this one now is $600 a week, generating a 7.27% gross yield on that original purchase price. So generating a really strong yield. So for this property, it's a really good lesson. I paid $19,000 lender's mortgage insurance on this one, which was big dent in the wallet, obviously. It was capitalized on the loan, so it didn't affect me too much. But that property then went on to make $130K in the first 12 months. So if you look at the return on investment for paying that $19K, if I didn't, I was missing out on $130 of capital growth. Now, obviously, there's some costs that come out of that, but I'm still well and truly up. And then that sets up the next purchases where I can leverage equity out of that property. So it's just super important to not always get fixated on 20% deposit plus costs. Sometimes if you want to go out there and leverage into multiple properties, you want to pay that lender's mortgage insurance, okay? Always talk to your broker, accountant, whatever. The plan with this property as well, just to touch on as well, tenants are moving out in July. I'll be doing a cosmetic renovation on this property as well, freshening it up. And then I'm actually going to do a granny flat play on this property. It is a Queenslander property situated closer to the front of the block. So I'll be putting a granny flat in the back, and there'll probably be some content that you can see in the future that I really show around this property. So it'll be good stuff to see. Moving on to the fourth purchase. So this one was purchased July 2021, $440K. Gross yield 4.96%, generating $420 a week. Now that property is now valued the established property, and I say established because there's a granny flat play that was added onto this one. Established property, $650,000, which is now generating a 6% yield at 510 a week on that original purchase price of 440. Um, the deposit was 12%, and paid lenders mortgage insurance. Now, 12%, if you speak to a lot of mortgage brokers, or quality mortgage brokers, I should say, 12% is that sweet spot where you're paying lenders mortgage insurance, but it's not really exorbitant. It's balanced out, so you're not going to pay a massive, massive amount. All right. So if you can balance 12% deposits, potentially get into two properties, it's going to serve you extremely well. So that property was done very well. And then because it was on a nice large piece of land, we were able to build a granny flat on this one. And we did that, which was finished March 2023. It was kind of on the back end of the construction challenges because of COVID and shortage of materials and whatever else. So it was a bit, it was a bit of a headache, to be honest, to complete the granny flat, but got there in the end. Spent roughly $200,000 on the build, and the yield on this one at the time was the weekly rent, I should say, $410 a week, making the yield 10.66%. So granny flat play on an established property can be super, super valuable. You've got that land component that's continuing to grow, but then you're injecting some cash into it with that value add, and it just helps hold that property long term. So it's generating a really, really solid yield, that purchase. Okay. Purchase number 5, August 2022. So if you kind of think about what was happening at that point in time, rates had been going up and people started to really freak out in the marketplace. And I kind of just saw the opportunity. I was like, I need to get another couple of purchases here. And that's what I did. So because my situation at the time, rates were quite high for myself, but I just knew that the capital growth that I was going to achieve was going to far outweigh those holding costs. So I was actually able to make this purchase. The property was on the market for $499. It had a tenant in place with a tenancy until October 2023. So it was a long tenancy and it was only at $370 a week. So it was really low. So it pretty much just wiped out all owner occupiers. But the property also didn't present well with the current tenants. So it scared a lot of other people off. I just kind of saw the value and I was actually able to secure this one for $450. So it's $50K under what they had it listed for. Yield at the time, 4.27%. That property I got valued this month at $650. Desktop valuation, those tenants are still in the property. And my mindset is when the tenants do move on, again, it'll just be, let's do a cosmetic reno, freshen the property up, and then we'll rent that property again. So just kind of taking on that property where a lot of people didn't have the appetite for it. It served me really well to the point where I've got enough equity to purchase another property. I did low doc lending for this, so I had to do a 20% deposit. So there's just lots of equity there now, and I'll touch on what I'm doing in the portfolio shortly. Now that property is now renting for $520 a week, which is generating a 6% yield. So we've got massive capital growth. We've got rental income growth. Obviously, it was situated low at the time, but then the market did grow in terms of rental income as well. So it jumped up quite a lot. And the tenants knew that they were getting a really, really good deal at $370 a week. So they were happy to pay in line with the market when we did increase that last year. So property number 6 was January 2023, $420,000. Yield at the time, this was a South Australia purchase, 5.44%. So the yield was a little bit higher and generating $440 a week. This property was secured. It was on the market. And again, the owners, they wanted a little bit higher for this property in terms of purchase price. But the challenge was with the settlement period, they needed to go out and find another property. So I negotiated to get this deal across the line, a rent back option. It was under market rent, but we also then got a 20K discount on what they were after for this property anyway. So got the deal across the line. Those vendors paid a little bit below market rent. They moved on within the 6 months, and then we rented that property out. That property is just about to get released at 520 a week, so it's a 6.43% gross yield, and values now 520 on that one. So it's got some really solid growth, rental income growth as well. And that property is a really, really nice one in the portfolio. It was the vendors had just completely renovated the whole thing, and it presents beautifully. So it's a solid little property. And then property number 7, I'd got this under contract November 2022, but it settled in February 2023. The reason why it took so long to settle, I negotiated a longer settlement, and again, tenant in place, paying below market rent. It's notorious that sometimes this kind of happens. So I purchased this one for $500,000. 410 a week it was generating, so 4.26% yield, very low. That property valued this month 650, so 150K I've made in that period of time since settlement in let's call it 15 months. One of the really important things with this property when I got it presented as an off market, CoreLogic had it listed as a 4-bed, 2-bath property, 2 garage as well. The property is actually a 5-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-garage. So when the agent set the vendor's price expectation, it was actually on a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-garage. I got it under market value for what a 4-bedder was. But then what happened was once I got it under contract, I submitted through CoreLogic. It's a 5-bedroom property, 2-bath, updated that, and then the value just jumped even higher again based on comparables. So made a lot of good, solid money on the way into that one as well. And then the tenants did move out of that property not too long after we settled. I did a cosmetic reno, just paint and floorings, freshened the property up, and then reletted that property. Relet it for $550 a week, and it's about to increase to $600, I think, in July. So solid capital growth, solid rental income growth. That property is, once that 600 takes effect, 6.24% yield. So it's just something to remember when you're purchasing. Don't think, okay, this property's costing me, on average at the moment, it's probably about $10,000. If you're not chasing yields and going super regional locations, we focus on metro locations. It's not always going to cost you that much each week, right? But what you also want to think about is, yes, it might cost me, let's call it 10K a year, but if I'm getting 50 to 100K in capital growth, it's just well worth it, those holding costs, to build your wealth and that asset base. A lot of properties have jumped so much this year alone already that if people are just sitting on the fence waiting for rates to go down to save 0.25% or 0.5% in terms of interest, it just makes no sense when you have to go out and buy the same asset for 50 to 100K more, because you have to borrow more money for that, or you need to inject more money into the deal to purchase that property. So the sooner you get in, the sooner it actually helps your cash flow long term. So if we look at the average yield when we purchased the portfolio based on yields at the time of purchase, it was 5.57% as a gross yield. The average yield now compared to those purchase price is 7.16%. So let's call it 1.5% jump. And some of those properties we haven't held for very long, like 15 months, right? So over time, that's just going to progressively continue to grow. And then that's where the power of that passive income starts to take effect as well, without even paying down any debt, right? So overall, current debt position is 3.1 million and net wealth is 1.7 million. Okay, with obviously the total asset base 4.8. Now, some of the plans moving forward for the portfolio, I'll just go over a little bit for you now. And I guess I want to just break down something real simple based off the portfolio right now and what it'll look like in 20 years' time. So if the portfolio at 4.18 mil grows on average 5% each year, which is super conservative, over a 20-year period, the property portfolio will be worth 12.7 million. All right. Assuming we don't pay any debt off, holding that interest only, the LVR still drops because the property portfolio increases in value. So we have an LVR position of 24%. Super low, super risk adverse. You're not leveraged super high based on those value. So at the time, you could go and offload a couple of those properties and help pay that debt down, for example, or you continue to hold and you're generating passive income because of that rental income growth. But it's just something to remember. Even interest only, paying no debt off, there's massive equity within the portfolio. All right. So I guess the plans for the portfolio moving forward is I have gone back and extracted equity from a couple of the purchases I've made in the last couple of years because of the growth. And I'm going to go out there now and make a couple more purchases. We'll be in the Brisbane market, and the sole reason is large land component, land banking, and then injecting a granny flat play into each of those properties. And those properties, based on my situation, I'll be purchasing them in trust because down the track when they start to service themselves, it has benefits within the portfolio to be able to go out and leverage further. And then second half of this year as well, I will be looking to inject that granny flat play on the on one of the early purchases in the portfolio that I mentioned. So it's just really making sure we get those land banking, land component purchases, but then come back and improve that cash flow, making it easier to hold. And it really just mitigates risk as well, right? Because you've got two tenants on one property that are paying rent. So if one moves out, you're still generating some income there. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the first episode, guys. Touched on obviously the portfolio, what that looks like, and the plans, and then just my background, my career a little bit, and the plan for the episodes moving forward. If you listen to this and you really want me to touch on something specifically in an episode that you think you can learn a lot from, please let me know. Reach out to me on socials, flick me a DM, whatever it is, complete a contact form on the website. I'd love to chat, love to understand what you kind of want to see and get from the podcast, because I just want to be able to give back as much education and knowledge as I can so you can go out there and purchase by yourself and make that decision and that investment just something that's going to perform way better long-term for you, but it's going to mitigate your risk as well. You don't want to go out there and make risky purchases or something where the property doesn't perform, because we're here to be able to create that financial freedom long-term. Thanks for listening. First episode out of the way, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the episodes that we've got coming for you. See ya. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you don't already, make sure you follow us across all of our social platforms. That can be Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. I wish you all the best out there on your property investing journey, and I hope each decision you make in purchasing more property gets you closer to your goal of financial freedom.